Hello again. We're working through Reproductive Strategies Parental Care, and this is the part 2 video. So let's take a look at where we left off. So we had focused on what does parental care involve and who provides the care. And now we ask, why do mostly females care? Or maybe another way to ask the question is, why don't males care more often or more frequently, right? There are several hypotheses for why do females provide most of the care or why don't males care more. One of them is the low reliability of paternity hypothesis. That's kind of a mouthful, but it makes sense. Females are certain that their offspring share 50% of their genes if it's a normal diploid sexually reproducing organism. So females are certain of their maternity, but males don't always know if they're the parent, right? They risk being cuckolded. And so the hypothesis goes, well, it might be better to abandon a female and her offspring, even if, because you're not sure those offspring are yours, and instead go spend your time seeking out more mating opportunities, right? If we're thinking about how males can increase or maximize their reproductive success, they need to find a way to maximize it. Maybe that means abandoning a probable offspring to just be cared for by mom and go out and hunt for new reproductive opportunities. That's very possible. And Mother Nature book talks a little bit about how sometimes males will provide just a little bit of care. Like most of the time, most of the care goes to mom, goes to the females. She provides, the food, the provisioning, the protection, all of the basic needs. But occasionally males can be temporary heroes, we call them. She calls them. Temporary heroes are those heroes who are the males who help out in an emergency, and maybe this is selected for. So temporary heroes might be males that are possibly the fathers of an infant. When they see an emergency situation, they jump in and they handle it. They defend their young. They provision their young in an emergency because it might be their young. So they're temporary heroes. They provide a little bit of care when it's really important. And this has probably been selected for because it's often a low cost. Don't care all the time. Just care in a dire emergency because it might be your offspring you're caring for. And that's a good thing. You would help your offspring survive. Hardy points out that savanna baboon fathers are a bit like this. Now, savanna baboons live in these societies with a female with multiple males around her, and she will mate with them, will mate with all of them. So paternity is unsure. Is a bit unsure, but occasionally a savanna baboon will jump in an emergency and be a temporary hero, and this may be selected for maybe protecting this infant against an invading male from a stranger male from a different group. This may be selected for because it does manage to increase your reproductive success over time. Okay, and another. Not hypothesis, but if the low reliability of paternity hypothesis holds out or pans out, then researchers said we can make a prediction, and the prediction is that paternal care should increase in monogamously mated men, because monogamously mated men have a higher certainty of paternity than, say, polygyny. Or a polygamous situation, or a promiscuous society, right? So we might predict that in males that are mated monogamously, they should provide more parental care. They should provide more paternal care, right? And researchers have found that in fact is the case in cultures that are indigenous cultures, like the Aka, who live in Central Africa. Turns out in this culture. This culture is what Hardy calls kind of a family-friendly environment where males and females form very tight pair bonds, and males, females, mothers, fathers, children, all work together to provide for each other because they do hunt small game and they hunt fish with nets, and they all are involved in the care, and so they're all around each other all the time. They're together more. And what we find in the Aka is that males spend 50% of their day within reach of an infant, 20% of their day actually touching the infant, involved in its care. This is unusually high, but it does fit with this prediction. It does fit with this hypothesis, suggesting that when males are involved in a monogamous relationship, a tight pair bond between a male and a female, he has more certainty of paternity and he's more likely to provide care. It also fits with our third hypothesis, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Okay, the second hypothesis goes something like this. Maybe it's the order of gamete release hypothesis. Well, who cares? Who cares? The last individual to release gametes, so to speak. All right? Whoever leaves gametes first should abandon, and the other parent is left to care. All right? That's the idea. With internal fertilization, with species that use internal fertilization, this does seem to fit the hypothesis. If one parent leaves, it's usually the male. With internal fertilization, mom is the last to donate the gamete, so to speak. Dad donates sperm, and he's out of there, right? And he leaves. This fits with, the data fit with the gamete release hypothesis for internally fertilized organisms, because males are more likely to leave with organisms that show internal fertilization. Externally fertilized organisms, it's a little bit harder to deal with. Sometimes males and females drop their gametes at the same time. Sometimes, the eggs are dropped first and then the sperm. Sometimes they're dropped simultaneously. Researchers have found evidence that this hypothesis data that doesn't support this hypothesis with respect to fish. And I've got a picture of a stickleback there. Got to show that stickleback one more time. In stickleback, males provide the care, and males are, in fact, the last to leave their gametes behind because females drop their eggs and then males fertilize them. But what researchers have found is when the eggs and sperm are simultaneously dropped, in fishes, more often males are left behind to care for the young. And male stickleback care for the young. So that's not exactly what this hypothesis would predict. So there's some evidence to support this hypothesis and some evidence that doesn't support this hypothesis. Okay. What are some other reasons why females do most of the care or males don't care any more than they do? And this is this hypothesis of association. Association with the young. And again, this is described pretty well in Mother Nature's chapter 9. So, association with the young. Whoever is present is more likely to provide care. So in animals that have internal fertilization, that's mom's job mostly, right? Mom is likely present. She's likely to provide the care. And we do see across the animal kingdom that moms are more likely to provide care. Moms with internal fertilization. So the association with young hypothesis and the order of gamete release hypothesis predicts the same thing. Sometimes when several hypotheses make the same predictions, you can't rule out either of the hypotheses. It's a little hard. Okay, what we do find, though, and Hardy mentions this quite interestingly, is that if we look at humans, in human cultures, and in today's world, we have, I would say that most of today's cultures are serial monogamy or loose socially monogamous relationships for sure, or fairly tight pair bonds, right? And we might expect males and females to care like the Aka people of Central Africa, where males are putting in a lot of care. And that's not really the case. And so research have looked at this. Why is it that males don't care as much as females? Is there some reasoning why, even though they're there, it's nighttime, the baby is sleeping, and the baby wakes up crying, why is it that mom gets out of bed first? That's the question. Well, researchers believe, and this is pretty well described in Hardy's work, researchers believe that mother is quicker to respond to the cries of a baby in discomfort. So if a baby is just crying, wah, wah, I've got a wet diaper, or I want something, or I'm hungry, mom is quicker to respond. Research has shown that. She has a lower threshold for responding. When she responds, she gets up, she gets the baby, baby starts to prefer mom, and then mom provides more care. And you see how this small difference gets kind of magnified into mom providing more care. Dad apparently doesn't respond with that low threshold to babies in general. He will respond. Males and females equally respond to a baby in extreme distress. So if the baby is screaming its bloody head off, then mom and dad will equally respond. But apparently this difference in threshold of responding to a want of the baby, to a baby in discomfort, that difference then gets magnified into mom providing most of the care. Find that interesting. So even though in many human cultures moms and dads are pretty closely associated with baby, moms do more of the care. Here's one more thing about the association with young hypothesis. This would predict that the more often males are close to the offspring, the more likely they are to provide care. And that's in fact really been shown true over and over again. So if mom dies and dad is alone with the baby, dad provides all the care. With the Aka people of Central Africa, clearly they live in a society that is kind of a family-friendly environment where mom and dad are both around all the time. He provides much more of the care than in other cultures. So that's a great example as well. So all three of these hypotheses help us to understand why females care more than males, but why males can care and why that can evolve. And in particular, we spent some time on humans here in Chapter 9 of Mother Nature. And then there are a lot of puzzles with respect to parental care. One of the puzzles that comes up in my mind is adoption, right? Adoption would be when an animal raises young that are not their own. When an animal raises young that are not their own. And particularly interesting is adoption of animals that are not even relatives. So the question is, how could this have evolved? Why would any animal raise young that are non-relatives? And there are some ideas, some more hypotheses. What you find in animal behavior is the development of a lot of hypotheses, and some of them are overlapping, some of them don't make any sense, but that's what we see a lot of in our research, right? So here are some of the competing hypotheses for why adoption happens. One of them is adoption is an adaptive behavior that enhances an animal's direct fitness. How does that work? Here's a situation. Fathead minnow males have territories in which they attract females to lay eggs in their nest, and they'll attract several females to lay eggs in their nest. Well, sometimes after a male has gotten at least some eggs in the nest, his territory will be invaded by another male. The new male coming in might kick out the old male. But that new male coming in leaves those eggs in the nest and takes care of them. Why? It helps him win more females. When females see eggs in a nest, she prefers to mate with those males. So the male, by leaving eggs in the nest that are not his and taking care of them and protecting them, he is more likely to gain reproductive success, to gain matings from other females. And so it pays off to raise young that are not your own in that situation. It's adaptive. Okay, how about this one? It's an adaptive behavior that enhances indirect fitness. Okay? Or maybe I think I changed this in your notes and I said something like it stems from an adaptive behavior that enhances indirect fitness. Why do we adopt babies that are not our own, that are not relatives? And I wrote here, it's an adaptive behavior that enhances our indirect fitness. Okay, let's think about this. Over our evolutionary history, humans were probably more likely to adopt relatives, children from relatives. We lived in small, close-knit groups of people, maybe 20, 30, 40 people in a little population, and they're probably all closely related to you. You had siblings, you had cousins, you had aunts and uncles that lived in your group. And if an infant's parents died and you took that infant and raised that infant as your own, you were probably raising a relative and gaining some indirect fitness through raising a relative. Okay? And today, we still adopt infants, we adopt young children, and researchers believe that perhaps this ability to adopt, this interest in adopting, this willingness to adopt, this nurturing ability, if you will, or this need to nurture, comes from an adaptive place. It typically was adaptive to take on and care for a nearby infant, because chances are it was a relative's child, and you would increase your indirect fitness. So it pays off to have the ability to nurture someone who isn't your own, so to speak. But in today's world, we still adopt. And we adopt from places across the globe. And so we know that they are not our close relatives. Researchers think that adoptions like this simply stem from what used to be an adaptive behavior. We have been selected to want to care for others, to want to help out, because in the past it has improved our indirect fitness. I think that's right. Some people think that adoption is not an adaptive behavior, but it stems from altruism. So when we adopted our daughter from Ethiopia, we had a lot of friends and not super close friends, but a lot of people tell us, wow, that's so impressive. You're so awesome that you're adopting from Ethiopia. That's such a good thing. You're such a good person, kind of. And I felt very uncomfortable with that. I was adopting because I wanted to adopt. It was a selfish act. It wasn't an altruistic act at all. And I felt like I felt weird in that situation. I do believe that we as humans have been selected to want to care for infants around us, to want to take care of others. And that's benefited us in our evolutionary history. And that's why we still adopt today, even if we're adopting non-relatives. There's a lot of evidence out there, a lot of research on who does get adopted, even in today's world. If we look at, West Africa, and we look at Ghana, or we look at the Arctic, or we look at oceanic communities, Southeast Asia, researchers find that people foster or adopt children to help establish alliances among your kin, to help train and provide social mobility or economic mobility for a relative. And researchers show over and over again that adoption often occurs among close kin. Okay, so this fits within the kin selection framework, if you will. We adopt because it enhances our indirect fitness. In today's world, we do adopt non-relatives, but that stems from this adaptive behavior that we've been selected to be nurturers, right? Oh, and there's another another reason why in the animal kingdom adoption could occur. It's a non-adaptive hypothesis. So the non-adaptive hypothesis is make the best of a non-perfect world. So if you're a gull, like a herring gull or a ring-billed gull, you're nesting among a whole bunch of others in a colony, and it might be smarter, it might be adaptive to accidentally adopt an offspring once in a while than to wrongly identify your own child, or your own offspring, I should say, as a stranger. You know, you should probably, you know about where your young is, you know where in the colony she is, you know her, but it's better to accidentally adopt a non-relative than to actually kick out a relative and, you know, to say, oh, that's not mine. Oops, it was mine and I didn't raise it. So that's why we think adoption sometimes happens in animals like gulls. In other animals, they are simply deceived. There are some birds that are called nest parasites, birds like brown-headed cowbirds. And what the brown-headed cowbird female will do is she will lay her egg in the nest of a totally different species, like a black-capped chickadee or a bluebird. And the bluebird parents will see the egg, they'll lay it, they'll sit on it, they'll incubate it, they'll feed the chick that comes from it, and they're raising a brown-headed cowbird young. They're deceived. This is not adaptive for them, but overall, their strategy makes sense. If there's an egg in the nest, it's mine. I should raise it. I should take care of it. In this case, nest parasite birds are deceivers, and they're feeding, or they're using an adaptive strategy in other species that now has gone awry, right? So those are some of the things that we talk about with respect to parental care. I think that's enough for this lecture, and we have one more lecture to go. I hope that you've been enjoying these lectures on reproductive strategies. These are some of my favorites. I think that's it for now. Thanks.